Hello, my name is Chigusa Sansen. I'm a program manager from Developer Platform team. Do you want to enhance your apps for dual-screen devices? Today, I'm here representing the people across Microsoft working together to bring you the UX guidance to just do that. I've structured this talk into 4 sections. In the first section, you will find out what this talk is about and learn what your key takeaways are. In the middle 2 sections, you will learn about the 3 dual-screen experiences as well as the 5 dual-screen patterns, so you understand what patterns might be helpful and the reason behind why. And then, we will wrap things up. Let's first make sure this talk is for you. I don't know how you arrived at this video, but you might be wondering if this talk is relevant to what you do. Regardless of the technology, if you are considering writing apps on dual-screen devices, then this talk is for you. You as developers probably know there are multiple layers in the platform that you work against to build your apps. On the bottom is an OS layer that provides you with core capabilities like input, sensor, displays, and more. The next layer is the UI platforms. They provide you with the UX support like common controls that is easy and efficient for you to use to create your app's UI. And on top are high-level frameworks like React Native and Xamarin Forms that provide you with facilities to write apps across multiple platforms. We put together a common guidance to help you build a coherent experience regardless of the technology you are using. There might be differences between platforms due to the differences in technologies. That can be avoided, but there are several videos we made available for you for Developer Day to help you with that. Do you want to find out how to enhance your apps for dual-screen devices while understanding if such enhancements are good for your apps? You will find out more about the 5 application patterns you might have heard Kevin Gallo mention in Developer Day keynote. Please note that I will not be sharing platform-specific information, including API references and code samples in this talk, to keep it simple. We published documentation that provides you with the details covered in this talk, as well as technology references. You can use it to follow along or find out about API reference and code snippets for specific platforms and techniques. This is a living document. We are constantly updating it with the latest information. We are also learning things as we go along on this dual-screen journey with all of you. So please be sure to check back to this site often because it is constantly evolving. There are 3 points to keep in mind as you think about supporting your apps for dual-screen devices. First, on a single screen, your existing experience will work. The underlying capabilities we provide you allow your apps to run and provide good experiences. And there are additional things you can do to improve it. Second, there are native guidelines appropriate for both Android and Windows. This guidance I'm about to share complements but does not replace that. Please take advantage of the UX guidance that each OS has, such as Fluent Design System guidance for Windows and guidance for Android. Following the native guidance to ensure your app feels natural on respective devices will let your app shine even more regardless of dual-screen support. Third, enhancing for the dual screens create new opportunities for your apps to empower your users. And this talk focuses on discussing how you, as app developers, can take advantage of the dual screens. Let's start by first understanding unique dual-screen experiences and learn about capabilities that you can use to achieve them. Through unique postures and patterns, dual-screen devices provide following compelling experiences to users. First, users can achieve bigger and broader tasks with connected apps that work together seamlessly. Second, your users enjoy the larger screen real estate with expansive workspaces. Third, you can let your users immerse themselves to be productive with focused screens that help them stay on their workflow. Let's examine connected app experiences. With only small improvements, your existing apps can be made to work seamlessly together with other apps or within your own apps to provide values to your users. To achieve this experience, you can enhance your app with the dual view patterns that I will share with you later in the patterns section in this talk. One easy way to support connected apps side-by-side scenario is to take advantage of the shell's capability to allow your apps to be launched multiple times. When using a device with two screens, users' natural instinct is to put one app per screen. So this is an easy way to occupy both screens with your app. Also consider supporting drag and drop with your app if not done so already. Since apps can run side by side to each other, drag and drop is expected to be a popular way for the user to move or copy content across apps or your own apps on this portable device. While this functionality has existed on both Android and Windows for quite a while, many apps might not be taking advantage of this feature because the current device may not be suitable for having a great experience. On this new dual-screen device, we are expecting users to perform this task with natural input like touch and pen. This is a chance for your app to shine and be used more often next to some other apps. So, consider supporting drag and drop of photos, text, and files. That said, drag and drop takes two apps to work. So, if your app has content like text, photos, and files that benefit other apps from receiving them, you might want to consider supporting drag and drop out of your app. If your app does not have content to drag as a source, but might be a candidate to accept content from another app, you might consider being the target of the drag operation. And both the provider and receiver should consider letting the user know clearly what would happen when the item is being picked up and about to be dropped, so users are not surprised as to what happens during the drag operation. By supporting drag and drop, it will not only make your app valuable on dual-screen devices, but also on other devices as well. Because the dual-screen devices are meant to be portable, we expect users to touch and pen, maybe holding the device on one hand. On larger devices and where the support is available, we expect users to also enjoy the mouse and keyboard. So, supporting all these inputs with your app will benefit you, not just for dual-screen devices, but other devices that your apps run on. Another feature you can take advantage of if you are a media-type app is a picture-in-picture. Picture-in-picture is a feature where a small view of your app remains floating above the other apps to let users continue viewing your content, while another app runs beneath it. This is a great way for your app to continue running over another app when a user decides to span the app to both screens to perform focused tasks. And it gets moved into Wonderbar automatically on a mode where Wonderbar is supported on Windows 10X. The next dual-screen experience is Expansive workspaces. Expansive workspaces take advantage of the larger screen real estate. There are several existing guidelines and functionalities that let you support this experience. There are also couples of more patterns we have in this experience category that I will tell you about later. So, how do you want to make your app support expansive workspace without doing too much work? First is consider supporting all the orientations. Consider all the creative ways your user could be holding and use the device, as well as taking advantage of accessories like a pen. You might consider ways your app might be used that is different from what you might be expecting your users to do today. Dual-screen devices' unique postures expand the ways your app could be used by allowing users to use your app in a whole new different way. Making your app layout responsive will let your app run smoothly across different orientations and make them work great for postures the dual-screen devices support. As I mentioned, this device will support single portrait and single landscape. These orientations require you to think of your app's height and width to change. This orientation works great with postures like tent, where you are pitching your device in a tent shape on a hard surface. And dual-screen devices also support dual portrait, which provides great experiences for book posture, where you are holding the device like a book. And dual landscape is a good layout to use with laptop or compose posture, where you have a device shaped like a laptop nicely. These additional orientations that dual screen provide, you just doubled your app's real estate to utilize for your valuable contents. Thinking about these 4 layouts will also improve your app in many other devices as well. And combined with postures, your apps will be even more enhanced for dual-screen devices. When you span your app, which is to extend the app across both screens, there is a seam in the middle. You might be wondering, do I have to do something about them for every UI? The good news is that it depends on your app's context, and it may not be always necessary. That said, you should avoid having text cut off in the middle. As you may notice here, when the text is cut off in the middle of the screen, it does not provide great readability and usability to your users. So, if you could avoid it, try not to get the text cut off at the seam by using some of the techniques I will show you later. We notice by our own experience using the device that when you rotate the device into a dual landscape orientation, where the user is holding the device with the 2 screens in landscape orientation in a flat surface or slightly bent, it is not as painful of an experience as having a vertical line. This is especially true when you can scroll the content freely. It even feels nice because you have a bigger surface to view the content by having the expansive workspace. When you have a freely scrolling canvas like a map, we find it not very problematic to have the seam in the middle because you as a user can move the content off the seam easily. I have an example of this later where you can see this in action yourself. Likewise, with scrollable content such as large table, where users can avoid the seam by simply moving the content, it feels good to utilize the larger canvas afforded by the dual-screen devices. Depending on your app's content, you might be able to enhance your app's experience with an expansive workspace without doing a lot of work. However, as you can see in this example, when something like a menu that is static UI is cut off, that creates usability issues. So this is content specific and you should still consider avoiding these issues. After all these points considered, if you decide that you need to work with a seam, there are several ways you can do so. You could simply avoid the seam by moving the content to one screen or another. We are working to provide common controls that have built-in behavior to avoid the seam. Or you could embrace the seam by purposefully aligning your UI content to snap to the line that is drawn. Or you might consider rearranging your UI elements so that they fit nicely into the 2 containers that are created by the seam by grouping like items. And you can find more details of some of these techniques in our documentation. As I mentioned earlier, we are sharing the thinking around initial 5 patterns for you to make your app more connected, expansive, and focused for your users. Before looking at these patterns, let me mention that we are constantly learning from our own app teams as well as from developers like you in the community. So know that these patterns may change or evolve as we learn more about them. Also, keep in mind that these are not a pattern for the entire app, but to be used in your app's specific UI as part of the overall app flow. So, in an extreme case, your app could choose to use all of the patterns if your scenario calls for it. When considering supporting dual screens, you should keep these key principles in mind. Think about your app's end-to-end flow and not narrowly focus only on a few screens that might be the perfect candidate for the dual screens. Please do not think just about the dual screen usage and only make functionality available when the app is spanned. You could make the functionality easy to access when spanned, but it should still be available on a single screen. Windows empower our users by giving them the power to choose. So, be sure to make your UI do something user would expect when it is spanned and let users decide. Users might want to focus, do multitasking, or do creative things when they span their apps. Think about the reason why your users might try to span your app in the context and enable that. To that note, it might be perfectly possible that the user might not even expect your app to support spanning. So, you should consider what kind of effort you want to put into your app by really understanding your user's intention when it comes to spanning. The first pattern I would like to introduce to you is called Dual View Pattern. This pattern would help the user use the device in all postures where two screens are used side by side or top to bottom to help provide connected apps experience. In this pattern, you might be comparing two documents next to each other to see what changes have happened. Or perhaps users are doing comparison shopping. Here's a sample from Surface Duo SDK that shows you how this pattern might work. Here, you have a list of places, and next to it is a map. As you can see, you are seeing the data, which is the collection of places in two different ways, one in a list and one in a map. Here's another example of UWP WinUI app of a side-by-side scenario where you are editing a markdown code on one side and having a preview on the other, so you can easily see what the result looks like while editing. In this example, we are experimenting with the placement of the editing pane by placing it on top when in dual landscape orientation. But that's not our statement about the behavior. I wanted to mention that to encourage you to play with the details of these patterns to see what works for your scenario and customers. The next experience category is Expansive Workspace, and one of the patterns that help you provide this experience with your app is called Extended Canvas. This is a pattern that lets your app take advantage of the larger screen real estate by simply expanding the canvas as is. We found that free scrolling canvas type apps like the ones you see here are great candidates for Extended Canvas. But keep in mind that you might still need to avoid the seam with parts of the UI where it might not scroll or cause usability issues, and the extended canvas might be just part of the overall UI. For those Windows apps that are very complex, this might be a good pattern to consider using. As mentioned before, here's an example of an app that is taking advantage of the larger canvas without caring about the seam. See how the scrolling through the surface feels natural, even with the seam in the middle. The next pattern to provide users with expansive workspace experience is called two-page. This is basically a pagination pattern to enhance your app with the book posture, because it just feels so good to hold the device like a book and look through content like that way. Doesn't it? So, Why not support such a scenario with your app? This pattern is especially interesting for those apps that already support paginated scenarios. Doesn't it make sense to utilize the two screens rather than having a scene running down in the middle of your document? Here's a simple sample that shows you how this pattern might work. The last dual screen experience category that I have not yet covered is called focused screens. This experience lets users focus on their tasks by creating appropriate views that will let users stay in their workflow without context switching. The first pattern that provides the focused screen experience to use is called master detail. This is a popular pattern you might already be familiar with, where you would have the master, which is typically a list or a grid of items, on one side, and details page on the other, that gets displayed when user selects one of the items in the master. One thing that we learned by using this pattern is that it feels so good to take advantage of the larger canvas when it is rotated to the dual landscape rather than try to compartmentalize the master and the list. So, in a way, this pattern is using the extended canvas pattern inside itself to take advantage of a larger screen because the context calls for it. Here's an emulator example showing master detail experience. This sample app was written before the dual screen effort was started. We took that app and rewrote it with two-pane view control that you might hear mentioned in other videos from this event. Two-pane view control is something we are trying to provide you consistently across multiple different platforms to create coherent dual-screen experiences. The last pattern, called companion pane, also helps provide focus to your users. It is a pattern where you are showing a complementary content to primary view. This is a good pattern to consider when on a small screen, you might have to hide the pane because of screen real estate, and it takes users extra step to access such information. Using larger canvas, you can export such pane besides the primary content to let users perform tasks seamlessly and effortlessly. This pattern is great for having tools on one screen, such as controllers for games or drawing tools for drawing apps, so the user can focus on their tasks. In this next emulator example, we have the photo editing tool. As you can see, the editing canvas on a single screen is hidden behind the button click, and it's overlaid so you cannot really see the whole picture in entirety while trying to edit on a small screen. Taking advantage of the second screen, you can move the tools part of the UI to the second screen and show the image in full in another. In this section, you saw 5 patterns that help enhance your apps for dual screens. That said, these are not going to be the only pattern nor the guidance set in stone. These are evolving, and we want your feedback as well as ideas for different patterns for us to try out together. Please take advantage of different GitHub repos where we are releasing samples to provide us feedback. Let's conclude. Today, you explored several different ways to enhance your app for dual screens so you can empower your users. You also learned that you might not always have to do work, depending on the context you want to target your users with. Connected apps, expansive workspaces, and focus screens provide your users with different ways to enjoy the dual screen postures. And all this information and more are available on the website today. Thank you.